Hi there, it's me again, Jack Wallen, and I am here with another Linux 101. Thank you for being with me on this glorious day to talk about Linux. That's why you're here, right? So before I get into the actual subject, there's something I want to address. And I'm not sure, but I bet a lot of you have experienced this. And this really doesn't just apply to Linux. It applies to a lot of things. But we're going to do it under the auspice of Linux. So, one of the great things about Linux is when you have to do X, there are multiple ways to do X. So you're not just limited to Apple's way of doing X or Microsoft's way of doing X. But here's the thing. Let's say I write an article and it gets published about doing X on Linux. And when I do that, when I write that article, I test it. I make sure that the way I explain how to do something actually works. Inevitably, someone will reach out to me to say, "Oh, you're doing it wrong. This is how you do it." Here's my take on that. First, thank you for reaching out to me and pointing things out. But second, you have to remind yourself that just because it works for you in a certain way doesn't mean it's going to work for me in a certain way. Or maybe it'll work, but it won't work in the way that I need it or want it to work. So instead of when someone shares something with you or whatever, when they say, "Hey, I found this cool way of doing something with Linux. Here it is." Don't go to them and say, "You're wrong. It doesn't work." Say, "Awesome. Here's another way of doing it." And they might learn from that. They might look at your way and go, "Oh, I can incorporate this and make my way even better or more efficient or work better for me." Instead of when you say you're wrong, they're probably going to go, "Oh, great. Wrong about another thing." Or it's some a-hole trying to shoot me down. A little kindness goes a long, long way. Even within the realm of technology. End of PSA. Let's get to the topic. I want to talk about ways you can get the most out of Linux. Any Linux distribution. Doesn't matter which one you're using. Doesn't matter. These should apply. Now, that doesn't mean they're all going to work for you. That doesn't mean you need to think, "Oh, he's going to list out all these things I have to do to make the most out of Linux." No. I'm going to tell you some possibilities. So you get to pick and choose which one applies to your situation and your needs and your personality and your skills. And I'm going to start off with the first one that I don't actually, it's not something you have to do. It's not. But if you really want to get the most out of Linux, maybe try learning the command line. And again, not saying you have to. And I know that when I'm using Linux, which is every day, all day, I can go without using the command line. I can. I don't have to use it. But there are certain things I do that I know I can do with more efficiency from the command line. And I'm actually glad that I learned how to use the command line a long time ago, because when I get stuck in a situation, I'm like, I'm not sure how to fix this or what's going on. I can just open up a terminal window, view some logs and go, okay, this is what I need to do. So the command line doesn't have to be your enemy. It can actually be your friend. And I would suggest that you take it slow to learn the command line. And here's a here's my best advice for people who are just learning the Linux command line. There is a tool, there's a terminal app called Warp. And I'm not saying that I don't know your stance on this, but Warp includes some AI. And with that AI, you can use natural language. For example, you could say, you can open up Warp and type in the terminal window, I want to upgrade my operating system. And Warp will use its AI and start testing against your operating system and then present to you the commands you need to use to upgrade the operating system. So it's a really cool way to learn how to use the command line. You could essentially never actually, and I don't much care for this route, but you could never memorize a single command. You could just use Warp and use natural language to figure out what all you need and then copy and paste and whatever. So get to know the command line. Doesn't mean you have to learn every command. Just get familiar with it so that if it should come to pass that you need it, you won't be afraid to use it. Next, understand package management. I'm not saying you need to understand the package management systems for every distribution. I know most of them, but there's still some that I'm like, what? Okay, sure. You're right, okay. But if you, most distributions, most modern distributions have GUI package managers. So you could never have to open up a terminal window and use the current command-based package manager system. You could use Ubuntu and never have to type apt get install whatever. But I think it would behoove you to get to know your package manager on your distribution. Understand how to use apt, understand how to use pacman, understand how to use DNF, understand how to use zipper, just in case. And a lot of this is just in case. But it's good to have that fallback, right? But even still, even if you're using the GUI, it's nice to know how it works. So, for example, you could be using the GUI with Ubuntu, and when you open up the apps store, you find an application you want to install, you can know that you can choose between the Snap, the Flatpak, or the Deb, and why you would choose each one. What benefits each one offers. So get to know your package manager. The next thing I would say, and this is a big one for me because I'm just that guy. Customize your environment. Get the desktop environment exactly how you want it. There's a certain joy involved with tinkering around with your desktop until you've got it exactly the way you want it to look and behave. It is cool. And I have, over the years, I have customized the Linux desktop to the point where they became works of art. And I enjoy that. But it's not just about having a cool desktop to share or patting yourself on the back. It's in the doing so, you learn something more about the distribution you're using and about the desktops that are available for Linux. And you might learn a different way of doing things, a more efficient way of doing things. For example, you might be using Papa or System 76's Cosmic Desktop, and then you discover, oh, what is this tiling window manager thing? I'll turn it on and see how it works. So customizing your desktop goes a long way to getting the most out of your Linux distribution. The next one is kind of a mixed bag, and I'll explain myself, but you should leverage open source software every chance you get. When you're given the choice between proprietary or open source software, choose open source software. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use all open source software. I don't. I have to use Slack. I use Spotify. I use a handful at most. I have DaVinci Resolve on my Linux system. So I have a handful of tools that are proprietary. And the only reason I use them is because I have to. The Linux equivalent of, the open source equivalent of DaVinci Resolve sucks. So I would never use it. Compared to DaVinci Resolve, it's a tinker toy. So, but at the same time, Linux is open source. And the more you use open source, the more you're supporting the people that make open source. Because I can talk all I want about DaVinci Resolve or Slack or Spotify, And those companies, they benefit from me talking about them, I guess. But if I'm talking about an open source package, that means the team that's developing that open source package might get a little bump. And every chance you can get to help promote or elevate an open source project, you should take it. Every time, hands down. But again, there are some proprietary applications that don't have open source equivalents. Next, I would say stay secure. Learn about the security of your distribution. It never ceases to amaze me when I'm testing a new distribution and I discover that the firewall is disabled by default. It's like, why? Why would you? And I get it. I mean, you don't want new users to install your distribution only to find out that nothing's working and not understand why, only that the firewall's on and they don't quite understand how to use it yet. Well, fortunately, like with Ubuntu, there's uncommon firewall, UFW, which is incredibly easy to use, like sudo UFW allow SSH. You just allowed secure shell traffic into your machine. Or sudo UFW allow HTTP. But it's not just that. It's also using strong passwords. Anything you can do to avoid harm befalling you. Now, you're already on Linux, so you're one step ahead of Windows users. That doesn't mean you're 100% safe. If your computer is connected to a network, it's vulnerable. So stay safe, which also means to update regularly. I wrote an alias, a bash alias, for my Pop! OS system, such that all I have to do is type update, and it runs sudo apt-get update, and sudo apt-get upgrade, and sudo apt auto remove. So it updates app, it updates the system, and it auto removes any unused apps. And so that alias makes it really simple. So every morning, one of the first things I do, open up a terminal window, type update, hit enter, and there we go. So my machine is always up to date. And I know I have walked into situations with servers and desktops, you name it, and looked at them like, this is so out of date. Do you realize how vulnerable this is? And people don't understand that every update that you run possibly adds a new security patch and bug fixes. So if you want to stay safe, even on a Linux desktop, where you might think that you're invulnerable, update every day. Back up regularly. I know that sounds like a no-brainer that everybody knows how you got to back up. Well, but people sometimes just don't do it because they've got to figure out how. I mean, there are plenty of tools on Linux to help like Deja Dupe. It doesn't get any simpler than that. And rsync. Rsync's a little bit more complicated because it's a command line, but there are actually front ends for rsync. So if you open up your App Center and type backup, you're going to find all sorts of apps that are available for that purpose. And I have certain directories on my Linux machine that always get backed up because they contain very important documents, mostly my novels that I'm working on, things like that. And you're probably, it's really easy when you're using Linux to think, nothing's going to happen. I'm using Linux. It's rock solid. Nothing's going to happen. Well, you never know. You just never know. You could have a hard drive go bad on you. And if you do and you haven't backed up, you had luck. And you're not going to enjoy that. I've been there. And I'll never be there again. Another thing you can do is get involved with the community. There are mailing lists and forums and all sorts. There are mailing lists and forums for almost each Linux distribution available. And I always find that when I get, or there are Facebook groups and things like that. I always find that when I get involved with the community, that it's not necessarily that I learned more about Linux, but I learned more about the effect that Linux has on people, and how people, especially, it's really cool when you're involved in the community and you see somebody new coming into Linux and how excited they are about it. So I remember back in those early days how excited I was, but I'm just used to it now. But seeing that is really cool. On top of which, if you're getting a little bit more advanced in your skills, you could help somebody. And I mean, come on, it's open source. Helping people should kind of be embedded in the ethos of that community. So get involved. And finally, I'll say this one. I'm hesitant to say this, but I know that people do value it. Learn about system administration. And I say that, like I said, I'm hesitant to say that because I don't believe that every Linux user has to be a system administrator of any sort. And I think the more standard users that we get in the Linux community, the better off it is. Because right now, or for the longest time, and it's getting better, but for the longest time, everybody, even the developers of distributions, always assumed that the only users using Linux were system administrators and developers, which meant that they were focusing their efforts for those people. And the more we see average users getting on board the Linux train, who want nothing to do with system administration, they just want to use an operating system that works for them, is reliable and is secure, the more people we have like that, the more developers are going to focus on them, which means Linux is going to just keep getting easier and easier and easier. But at the same time, it's kind of cool to see how far you can push Linux and how it can work within the realm of a business environment or just your home LAN. It's really cool that all of a sudden you're like, ooh, now I can deploy Nextcloud, so I don't have to use Google services anymore. I can have an in-house cloud system and save all my files and share them and all that other stuff, and I don't have to do any of that googly stuff. But at the same time, I need to learn how to administer it. So that's kind of fun and cool, and when you do those things, you learn even more about Linux. And I'm a big proponent of education. Obviously, I've been a teacher for a number of years. Not now, but well, I guess I still am. But you know what I mean. But any chance you can get to improve your skills is great. I'm not saying you need to have the goal of, I want to be a system administrator. You don't have to do that. You can just say, I want to learn more about it so I can do more with it, even though I'm just an average user. Because that's part of the thing, I believe. When you're using Windows or Mac OS, you know that it kind of peaks around here. You can do about this much with it. Now, this much is important because it allows you to get the things you need to get done. But with Linux, you can do this much. Doesn't mean you have to do that much. You can stay down here all you want and be great. But you might want to see what's up there because the view is pretty good. Now, as I said, these are just suggestions. This is just my point of view of how to get the most out of Linux. And maybe here's another one. I'll add this. Explore new distributions. Sure, you love the one you use. That's great. But install VirtualBox and then spin up some virtual guests of different distributions just so you can see what there is to see. You might wind up finding a desktop environment that you like more than what you have. You might find another distribution that has a certain feature that you like, and who knows, you might switch, you might not. But it's cool that it's possible. And see, and I think ultimately that's sort of the thing here, is that the more you use Linux, the more you realize you can do with Linux. And as you realize that, it kind of opens up a whole new world for you of security, of reliability, of flexibility, you name it. So there you have it. That's what I have to share with you today. I hope that maybe something I have said has inspired you or given you some food for thought. Thank you so very much for being a part of this with me. It means the world to me that you're willing to take this little bit of time that is precious, I know, because we're all very, very busy. And you're willing to listen to me blather on about a topic that we all know and love. Anyway, I hope that you and everyone you know and love, I just repeated myself, have a wonderful, wonderful day.